Well, I haven't made a YouTube video in quite a while. How hard could talking about something be? So, what's first on the agenda? Right into the fucking fire, aren't we? Ahoy, mateys! I am just a fan of many things, and I am a crazy mate that is a fan of many things. This, hopefully, series, Second Glance, is mostly going to be me rambling on topics I think are noteworthy to talk about, mostly seeing if things I liked in the past still hold up today. And I have to say, I am certainly beating a dead horse as far as SpongeBob is concerned. Going off script here for about a few moments here, One Course Meal has been torn to shreds by the cartoon community for a while now, most notably by Mr. Enter, Cool Cat, and Mortified Productions. All three of them may have covered this episode, but there is just one thing I want to do that's a little bit different compared to the rest of them. I want to see how well it stacks up against Nasty Patty, which is probably the best episode of the series, and also probably one of the darkest. During his video, Mortified Productions did cover One Course Meal a little bit and compared it to Nasty Patty. Let's not beat around the bush. One Course Meal is the most infamous episode of SpongeBob as far as I'm aware of, or at least one of the most infamous episodes, not counting any specials of course, while Nasty Patty is a beloved episode by many. Why? I could easily say that One Course Meal's infamy came about due to Mr. Enter talking about it a long time ago. His style back then compared to now is a very stark contrast. Back then, Mr. Enter was a far more angry reviewer, I guess you could say, and I believe he did have a role to play with its infamy, but I don't think he is the biggest reason why it's so infamous. While Mr. Enter did have a part in why this episode became so goddamn infamous amongst anyone who reviews cartoons, I don't think it's just because of him. I think that the main problem comes within these few small clips that are 15 seconds each.
What's the point of going on? I'll just be tortured for the rest of my life by that whale. That's it, I'm done. The 4:15 bus should be along any time now. Go away, cheesehead! Can't you see I'm trying to get run over?
Something ain't quite right.
What do you mean, Mr. Krabs?
His head's sticking out!
So gross. The back door is locked. What am I gonna do? So if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go put my hat in the freezer now.
Stop it! Oh, you're killing me! Oh.
With very little context, the most people would take from a small clips I showed is that Plankton is trying to commit suicide. While for Nasty Patty, you see Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob trying to bury a body and hide from the police. Yet at first glance, I think it wouldn't be too surprising to say that Nasty Patty is a better episode based on the few clips that I showed. God damn it. The reason why I think this is because both episodes have a different way of telling their respective stories. In Nasty Patty, there is humor or attempts at humor present throughout all of the episode. Is something kind of bad? Maybe. It's subjective. I know it's not to myself, considering I like dark comedy. Meanwhile, on the other hand, One Course Meal lacks that comedic effect that Nasty Patty had. And I don't mean it's unfunny, that's obvious. If it was, I wouldn't be talking about it. What I mean by lack of comedic effect is that throughout One Course Meal, there really isn't anything that is funny, and what is there is only going to piss you off. There's a severe lack of comedy throughout this episode, something that was severely needed in this episode particularly. Let me just summarize this episode really quickly. Mr. Krabs learns that Plankton is afraid of whales after he had a failed attempt to get the formula. That sounds pretty simple, right? And it is. And that's because, at its core, this episode was not meant to be Mr. Krabs stalking and harassing Plankton. This was supposed to be kind of a prank-like episode. The reason why I think this episode was meant to be a prank episode was actually the structure and the premise. The structure is supposed to be a Krabs versus Plankton episode. Okay, sure, that works. But it's also involving Plankton having a sudden fear of Pearl. That concept alone opens up a lot of creative ideas. And now I can't help but wonder, where was the comedy for One Course Meal? The most I saw was seen right in the beginning when Plankton tries to give a formula and fails. He stops trying to get the formula, and the comedy is going for driving Plankton to suicide? I guess? The dark comedy card can only be played so far in the case of One Course Meal. This is not comedy, or at least comedy that's not executed well. Now let's take a look at Nasty Patty really quick. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs are trying not to get caught by the police, but everything that happens is a series of comedic misunderstandings that led to this actually pretty dark episode ending up becoming one of the best. That's because the writers and animators, actually the whole team behind it in general, tried to make it as comedic as possible to let you, the audience, know that they're trying to have fun with this concept. And I think the main reason why One Course Meal failed compared to Nasty Patty isn't really just because the concept versus execution. It's time and I think that's the biggest problem with Season 7 and One Course Meal. Well, time. I'm pretty sure that the team behind Season 7 and the team behind Season 3, they both had different amounts of time to polish their product. No matter how much I try to slice it, I think that is the main issue. Because Season 3 had a lot more time, Nasty Patty actually ended up being a lot better than it had any right to be. Meanwhile, Season 7 is more or less forgettable at this point, outside of being a harsh lesson on why you should always give your team more time to work on their product, and not just rush shit out the door. Otherwise, you'll get shit like One Course Meal. Of course, I can only speculate given how forgettable Season 7 is outside a few episodes in particular, that there might have been constant miscommunication, constant clashing ideas, cases of too many chefs in a kitchen, or the team's just not understanding how these characters work compared to how a fan would understand it. But I think that's all that really needs to be said about One Course Meal. I actually had this small little section of this script, which I've probably gone off script multiple times, by the way, and I would actually show what both of these teams worked on before and after SpongeBob, but I decided not to, and I'm just going to add it in the description below, maybe in the comments section, which I'll then pin. For anyone curious, I used the SpongeBob Wiki and also Wikipedia. That's your extra credit right there. Look them up and decide for yourself if I was being too lenient with them concerning being One Course Meal and the seasons they worked on post first movie. I guess the lesson we can take here today is don't rush the creators of whatever thing you like or is working on something for you, or you might end up with crap. And always do your research about who worked on what you're talking about, because you might learn something surprising. I am just a fan, and I need a glass of water. No, seriously, I need a glass of water. It's 100 degrees outside.